Good morning, guys. We're going to get started now. Welcome to the Africa Marcom series. This morning, we will be talking about the African events market and, having successful strategies to really maximize this evolving and growing industry. We have a great special guest this morning, Akosua Annobil, who's the founder of Tech in Ghana. We're going to have a great conversation around her experience in the UK and African events market and how she's built Tech in Ghana to be one of the number one tech event in Ghana. But before we get there, we just wanted to quickly talk about what the Africa Marcom series is as a reminder. So it is the brainchild of Dimax and Talking Drum Communications. And we, as two individual businesses, decided that there's a lot going on in the African business industry. And we're living in an age of information and content overload. And so businesses need marketing and communications professionals to help them cut through the noise to reach their target audiences and to support business goals. So as the Africa Marcom series, we aim to bring together experts from various marketing and communications disciplines to explore how they are navigating the evolving African business landscape, sharing best practice. So we tend to run one session a quarter, on a variety of different topics, things that are front of mind, topics that are important or being discussed amongst the industry. So what we've got coming up next, our next session, which will be in June, will focus on CRM, which is a tactic that's currently underutilized by a lot of African businesses. We'll be talking about growth marketing, B2B comms, etc. So keep an eye out for information about those upcoming sessions. So I'm Joanna Steele. I am the co-founder and MD of Dimax, which is the digital marketing agency which helps African-focused businesses and events with their brand visibility, sales, and revenue. My experience, I've worked in the marketing field for over 20 years. The majority of my experience in the UK, working for a number of retail giants, such as Sainsbury's, Argos, etc. Bemi, who won't be on camera today, he is the founder and MD of Talking Drum Communications, which is an African tech PR company. And he and I have come together to put together this series. He has over 14 plus years PR and comms experience. He's the founder of Talking Drum Communications, which is a PR and communications consultancy that works with organizations innovating in Africa. So this session is for event organizers who are hungry for success strategies in the African market. It's also aimed at marketing professionals who want game-changing tactics for their events brands, and also professionals who are looking to incorporate events into their organization's marketing strategy. So you are going to learn and understand the $1.3 trillion global opportunity in the events market, the MICE market, which stands for meetings, incentives, conferences, and events. We're going to be talking about what makes the African events market unique and full of potential, how you navigate pitfalls and conquer challenges, and how you stand out as an event of choice amongst an increasingly competitive market. There are more and more events happening on the continent, business events, conferences, etc., particularly in certain industries, tech, for example. So it's important that you're now competing for sponsorship, partnerships, delegates. So how do you stand out as an event of choice? And so we'll also go through some of the marketing tactics that Dimax has used with Tech in Ghana, which has helped sort of support the brand's growth over the last few years. So the $1.3 trillion MICE opportunity. So that's the value of the global MICE market. which is it's set to grow to the value of 1.3 trillion within the next couple of years. But currently, Africa only accounts for 3% of that market. But despite that, we're seeing huge growth in the Middle East and Africa, where the value of the mice market is set to grow from $54 billion to $77 billion by 2028. So that's a growth of about 43% within the next few years. So what we're seeing is numerous African countries are better positioning themselves to take advantage of this industry growth. So they're doing things like, improving infrastructure, whether it's, better flight options, more airlines flying into the country, better accommodation, improving accommodation options, having international hotel standards. We're seeing a lot of countries who are looking at open visa policies, and other things, trying to sort of position themselves in for the market. Also looking at, creating state-of-the-art facilities. There was an announcement recently that Nigeria is completing its first 12,000 capacity arena, which is due to open in Lagos in December 2025. And you have countries like Rwanda, who have implemented a national mice strategy 10 years ago, and they're really seeing the fruits of their labor with that. Once in the top 10 when it comes to events destinations, they're now second on the continent after South Africa. And last year had a record of $91 million generated from the mice market. Ghana, Ethiopia, and Botswana are three other emerging mice destinations as well. So there's a lot going on the continent. There's a lot of countries who are seeing the benefits of sort of business tourism, and are doing the work, building the infrastructure to welcome as many people into their countries. So next up, we're going to do a quick video to introduce tech in Ghana.
What if I tell you that you can kickstart your career in tech even if you don't have any prior experience in?
We're going to try that again. Hold on one second. I'm not quite sure what's happened to the... I'm going to stop that. Bear with me.
Describing tech in Ghana in one word. It is revealing.
Powerful.
Needed.
Ecosystem.
Inspirational.
Tech in Ghana is exciting.
It's already making more than 5,000 deliveries per month. Swoop's founder says launching a business during an economic downturn has served as a baptism of fire.
Because of the...
I hope you were able to hear that. Did the sound...
No.
work?
We just saw a blank screen and heard the ending.
Oh, I want to try that again. Shall we try that again? I think we should try that again.
Okay.
Give me 1 second, everyone. Got it?
Describing tech in Ghana in one word, it is revealing,
Powerful.
needed.
Ecosystem.
Inspirational.
Tech in Ghana is exciting.
I'm not sure that worked well either, but
We got the idea. We got
There
the
you
idea.
that's it. It's always the way. So welcome, Akosua. Good morning. How are
Thank
you?
you. Really good. Pleased to be here. Thanks for having me. I was just thinking this morning about how throughout probably my entire sort of career in events, I've not really focused and audited my background in events. So this is a really yeah, a bit of an eye-opening opportunity for me to sometimes, you know, just take stock and think about, you know, what we've done in the past. So yeah, pleased to be here and pleased to share. And hello to everybody on the call. I know we can't see you, but we believe you're out there.
Just about. Brilliant. So yeah, this is going to be a good conversation. We want to know sort of, you've got all the juice, you've got so much experience in the event space. And I think you've got so much value and knowledge that you can give to people in order to sort of, you know, take advantage and build similar brands on the continent. So first off, just tell us a bit about your backgrounds. You know, what was the journey to Tech in Ghana? Because Tech in Ghana has been around since 2017. So you were definitely doing things before that. So what was the journey before? Sort of.
Yeah, I think, as I said, I'll focus more on events. So my background is like in journalism, communications, like radio, TV, and all of that in the UK. But like focusing solely on sort of my events background, probably in the early days when I was sort of an entertainment journalist and I grew up in the East End. So I knew a lot of the young talent that was coming up at the time, your Dizzy Rascals and all of that, were looking for places to sort of promote themselves. And I used to do sort of little events in bars back then, sort of as a hobby almost. And my brother was in a group as well. So I did some of that with him. And then by the time I started working for national newspaper, national radio, I got into more sort of live music events, and that was sort of bigger, sort of more established artists in Shoreditch and those kind of places, and then eventually ended up producing the Channel U Awards. And then later on after that, got into sort of bigger events, such as, I'm sure many people on the call probably know, Gooba, the first like 2 Gooba Awards. I produced those, and then that sort of led me, and I'll come back to sort of how I got there, sort of into doing sort of Tech in Ghana, and then eventually having work with, you know, the UK Ghana investment summits and producing for people like that, doing stuff with the Ministry of Communications and their event in South Korea, and launching events for sort of Ghanaian tech companies in Ivory Coast. So I've done a lot in the event space generally, but leading to Tech in Ghana specifically, having been in the industry here, the events, well, the media industry here for 15 years. In 2012, my mum died really, really suddenly. And that kind of was the catalyst for me thinking about Ghana and thinking about doing in the UK, in Ghana, initially as a journalist, or maybe going into radio. But after some thought about it, I ended up focusing more on like creating a communications company and doing maybe some business missions and stuff like that into the country, which was good initially. So in all my spare time, what I was doing was going to events, Africa-focused events. So I was still living in the UK, going to Ghana when I needed to, and then sort of attending as many like Africa-focused events as I could. By now, it's like very, very I'd say early days, like 2013, 2014, whatever. And I noticed that all the events that I was going to that were Africa focused were talking about technology. But when, you know, we got to sort of the end of the event, I'd be thinking, so what's happening in Ghana then? Because they were focusing mainly on Nigeria and Kenya and Rwanda and South Africa, but for good reason, right? Because those were like the leading players in tech at the time. But I knew that there was a lot happening in the tech industry in Ghana. So I started asking around and be like, you know, what's happening in Ghana? What's happening in Ghana? Why are you not talking about X or Y? The things that I was seeing. And it was just because they just didn't know, right? So to me, that was a really clear indication of a gap in the market. You see, what I used to be really passionate about, and one of the reasons why I started doing events even in the early days, was that I knew that if you want to change a narrative, like from a journalist perspective, you want people to talk about something. Sometimes you have to create the thing for it to be spoken about. And I felt that that was the case when around tech in Ghana. It was like, okay, people are saying they don't know about it. I can tell you about it, or I could create something that will show you what's going on, right? And that's sort of how it was born. So that was like 2016. I started really getting into thinking about, you know, the whole concept. And then by February 2017, we launched in London. Yeah.
Amazing. And, you know, it's grown to an amazing brand since then, and we'll sort of get into that. I think just to kind of make people aware around sort of the kind of premise of Tech in Ghana, and just give a bit more information around the brand and the fact that you have 2 events, just in case anyone's not aware of the sort of setup.
Yeah, so initially Tech in Ghana was founded to promote Ghana's tech ecosystem to a London audience. So I was based in London. I knew what was going on in Ghana. I had this, you know, opportunity to partner with the UK Ghana Chamber of Commerce, which had just launched at the time. And the founder happened to be somebody who was, you know, connected to my newsletters and stuff through my communications company. And so, you know, I told him about my idea, and we decided to bring some of Ghana's leading tech companies to Ghana. To London. And so this was just like a typical conference where people did, you know, keynotes, presentations, and some panel discussions. And these were the players from Ghana's tech ecosystem that flew over and then had a sort of conversation with the tech ecosystem here in London about what was happening in the market. Now, the feedback that I got from the speakers who came over was, this is really good, because remember now, this is 2017, quite a while ago. They were like, this is nothing like this is happening in Ghana. You should do this in Ghana. A new government had just come in, and I thought, why not? Went to Ghana that same year, and then decided to launch the same event, but in Ghana. Of course, it had to be slightly bigger because of the proximity to being around much more tech companies. And essentially, that was the beginning, I think, of the bringing together of the ecosystem, because initially it was just bringing over companies, whereas that was like, oh, we're bringing the ecosystem together, like, you know, education representatives are here. There are like government agency representatives here, as well as the founders, as well as some investors, you know, as well as some enablers and those who are running tech hubs. So it became this space that brought together everybody into one room. But the way I'd sort of, I guess, organized the event, or the way, based on my experience, I think it allowed for everybody to feel welcome. And I think that was the key at that time. It was like, you know, I made space for everybody. There was no rankings. Everyone had an equal platform. And then that, for me, was really the true beginning of the Tech in Ghana that we see today. And then we started and continued with that pattern of doing one in London and doing one in Ghana every year.
And I think you touched on a really good point there around sort of cultivating community, or kind of sort of bringing the community together. And I probably think that's one of the key things that has helped the brand stand the test of time, because it's almost like the ecosystem, you know, in Ghana, everyone knows each other, sort of you kind of have brought the community together through that brand. So definitely, I think it's a key part of the success. So tell us about the early days. So we talk about, you know, people always want to know about the challenges, and I know you're a glass half full kind of person. So your challenges are actually, you know, opportunities. But, you know, let's be let's be honest, what's, how have you navigated them, or some of the earlier challenges, and, maybe those challenges still exist. So tell us a bit about sort of the early days.
Yeah, it was hard because, as I told you, right? So I'd done all of this fancy stuff, entertainment, journalism, whatever. But once I touched down in Ghana, literally no one cares about your history. It's like, who are you and what do you want here? And I think that was like the key really is how, like, what is the value you're bringing into this market before you trouble me with a conversation. So some of the challenge, I think, at the beginning was really about understanding like the protocol of going into Ghana and trying to do an event such as Tech in Ghana, because Tech in Ghana, you're essentially coming in to like represent the nation with a massive sector, right? So it's quite a brazen thing to do. Luckily, I got a bit of advice from an elder who said to me, listen, the first thing you need to go and do is speak to the Ministry of Communications, right? Because when you step into a place like that, and if you want to do an event on that kind of level, then you need to let people know you're coming in. And it was a really good piece of advice. But then that's where the challenge began, because that's when I learned that, going to see the minister don't just mean writing a letter saying I'm coming over and having a nice meeting. It means visiting and revisiting and waiting and, minuting and, trying to get that meeting took me, almost, I think 2.5, maybe 3 months in the first place, right? So those are the kind of challenges that I had, was like getting myself introduced. Another thing which I wouldn't say was a challenge, but was important and took a while, was getting to navigate and understand who everybody was. Because again, I didn't want to go in and just trying to create something based off of who I knew. It's like I needed to understand, where does the ecosystem stand at this moment in time? So I had to like ask a man to ask a man to ask a man, and understand who are the leading tech companies, who owns them. Can I have a conversation? People like Ehi from Rancard, there was some real like big boy players in the market who I had to go and basically say, hi, this is who I am. This is what I'm planning to do. What do you think? Is this something that's needed? Right. And getting the feedback from them, and then they'll give you feedback, and then they will say, yeah, and you also should go and speak to this person or that person. So before going in and actually doing the event and actually trying to book an event, some people are like, I want to do an event, I need a venue, and you go straight in, all guns blazing. Like, spend some time actually doing a bit of research, not just about, that sounds cliche, but it's true. I don't mean research by going to a book or going on Google. Actually having conversations with people who are in the market, right? And the beauty about Ghana is that people have that hospitality, I guess, reputation that we have. It runs true throughout all, I guess, aspects of interaction. And so I did get a lot of really good feedback very early on. And I'd say I'd spent a good, almost a year, like having those conversations to be sure about how do I execute and do the first one. Another thing that I noticed as well is that not everybody, when you're about to do the event, that says they're there to be involved and help you, are going to help you. I'll never forget being in this meeting with an institution in the first year of being in Ghana. And in this meeting, there was all different agencies. There was about, I think I remember counting 32 people, including a couple of people from media. So the intention was there. But that's when I didn't know that to attend a meeting, just to attend a meeting, you'd get paid to attend a meeting, like as part of your job role. So I'm like, wow, look at this amazing group of people. But quite quickly, as we started having more and more meetings, I realized there was less and less people attending. So, you need to understand people's intentions. And ultimately, what it made me do is say, look, if I'm going to do this event, I need to draw on the people that I know already, not people that I like, or people that I, want to work with. It's like, who's got the skill sets to do an event? Like, seriously do an event. Who knows how to do, like, relationship building, liaison, build exhibitions. And I started focusing on actually building my own strong team and not getting overexcited about people that were getting introduced to me. And that was really something that was worth doing, because I think out of that 30 odd people in that meeting, there was about 4 people that turned up on the actual day of the first Tech in Ghana event to help. So the rest was the team that I'd put together. So yeah, a few I guess things like that stick out for me.
Definitely. And then how do you think the experience of doing an event in the UK, it kind of differs to Ghana specifically? So when you're thinking about logistics, processes, and sort of from a strategic point of view, I think there's a story you mentioned about the printing of the brochure, which I quite like. But yeah, give us a sort of sense of
I'll talk about that.
the differences.
I think in London we've been really, really lucky because we had whilst I was doing that, going around to different events before I started tech in Ghana, I noticed the venues that like to host events like yours, right? And I was like, okay, let me go and approach one of these guys, which I did, and that was Adolshaw Goddard. And they're an international law firm, and they were already, they've got their own reasons as to why they want to engage the African community, but they've also got brilliant facilities. And when I approached them with Tech in Ghana, they took pretty much all the weight in terms of logistics off of our shoulders. They've got, the setup is there. They do, the lunch, the breakfast, everything is in like one place, versus in Ghana where you have to pull in vendors from all over the place and then actually merge them together. And you do that by having really good partners on the ground, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
But one myth I want to bust immediately with like people that might be listening who assume that doing business in Ghana or doing events in Ghana may be more difficult, right, than doing it in the UK, which in some ways, yeah, it is. But the bottom line really is that, sorry, it's done. I think that's going to happen. So bear with me. The bottom line is that in my experience, Ghana has been like a lifesaver in this instance, right? So that what Joanna's talking about is in the early days, we used to have a publication with the conference. Usually you go to a conference, you get a brochure, on your seat, and it's got all the speakers in there and a couple of features and keynotes. And we used to do one in the days with every Tech in Ghana event. And I remember like the second event that we did in Ghana, it wasn't the fault of the printers, but we were trying to wait for, I think it was like a keynote from the minister or something like that, that had to go back and be changed and all of this. And literally the night before the event, the keynote still hadn't arrived, right? But the printer did not close and waited until we got that speech so that to make sure that we could actually have our magazine on time in the morning, right? So what we did was, once we got it, my designer as well kind of quickly designed it, got it printed out, and then he worked really closely with the printers to make sure that we had a batch in the morning, and then we got batches all through the day. Now try and do that in London when the printer closes at 5. At 1 minute past 5, no one's helping you. Like, you missed the deadline,
100%.
love. You missed the deadline, right? so like, when I think about doing business in Ghana, it's like that sort of unprofessional sort of, I guess, attitude that people have towards it, I think can sometimes work in your favor. And I think and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, therefore it's easy and great, but you do need to find this balance between, having your standards and understanding the terrain that you're in. Do you know what I mean? And similarly, I learned the same sort of lesson with the media as well, because it's a really big thing when you're doing events in Ghana or probably on the continent, is to really get media involved. People like that. People like that, the press, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more about the digital media side later. But in Ghana, the media as a standard get paid to put whatever press release you have in the paper. That's standard. Coming from journalism, I was like, what? No way. What? What about how ethical is that? It took a while for me to understand the reasoning behind that, right? Some people needed even just money to get to your venue, or fuel money or lunch money and things like that. So it wasn't just about like, taking money for you from no reason. There was actually a structure around how journalists work there. So again, to be, and then, once that we got that relationship in place, it made, it was a really beautiful bond that we had and grew with the media there. So yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily sort of be too quick to judge when you go in and see things going wrong, because of sometimes it's that same attitude that will get you out a lot of problems later on.
100%. And actually, if we look at it as not necessarily that one is better than the other, harder than the other, it's just different, right? It's just different.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. It's just, you know, how good at you're putting your own ego down, right? And then seeing it for what it is. And there are times where it's extremely frustrating. But I've had similar issues here with, like, you know, in company in London, where I had issues with my pull-ups. You know, the pull-ups turned up and it was the wrong pull-up, you know what I mean? And things like that. So it's, you know, when you've been doing events for a long time, over a period of time, you see that there can be issues, but you just figure out how to mitigate them ahead of time. You can see where you know, where you need to keep an eye out, depending on the type of event that you're doing.
Yeah, brilliant. And then if you think about, so a big part of events, for a lot of events is obviously the ticket sales, but obviously as well, sort of the partnerships and the sponsorship, right? And that could be, you know, having those right relationships or having those in place can make or break an event. So we know that they bring a lot of value and they're crucial. So tell us more around sort of how partnerships have worked and how sponsorship has worked and how you approach getting sponsors and partners on board for Tech in Ghana.
Yeah, one of the I think the real benefits about being on the continent is that you can get to the people in power really quickly, right? When I say people in power, like the head of Visa, the head of a bank, you know, the decision maker when it comes to money, you can get to them much quicker than you might be able to get to them in the UK. And Visa's a literal case. You know, I ended up invited the head of Visa Ghana. She's left now, but ended up being like quite a friend when being based there. And then here, you know, I wouldn't even know where to start. How did you get to the head of Visa the UK? Like, you know, so I think there are some advantages to access when you're on the continent. And I would definitely say you would need to be there. If you can't be there all year round, you definitely need to spend significant amount of time on the continent, if at the very least it's to build those relationships. But with raising money, you know, like anywhere in the world, it can be tough. There's a few things that I can say. Engage the people who have synergy with your event all year round. Do you know what I mean? Don't wait for your event to come and then you start going, oh, I've got an event coming up. Engage them all year round, watch what they're doing, build relationship with them. And then also when you are ready and you identify who has the money, because you will see who has money. Sometimes you can see them doing like some marketing campaigns. Sometimes you see them sponsoring other people. So you get a bit of a gauge. You can see who like gets some funding in. So you have to be quite tactical about like who you're approaching and not just approach people without any sort of prior understanding as to like what their situation is or where their standing is within your industry. And like I said, on the continent, if you've got that relationship, you can probably get that information firsthand if you sort of spend a bit of time and have a bit of patience. Create packages, right? When you're creating your packages, make them realistic. I was a bit like, and I still think sometimes my packages are a little bit unrealistic because I'll get to know the market more. I'm like, do we need to go down? Do we need to go up? Depending on who you're talking to. So, you know, sometimes you need to be a bit flexible with your like packages. And when I say packages, what people do sometimes is like have a package, like let's say for argument's sakes, gold, silver and bronze. All right. And you know, the gold packet might give you, you know, a panel and a keynote and some branding and this and that and the other. The next one might have some of the same, but a bit less, and the same, but a bit less, right? So, and then you package them, let's say, you know, 5, 10, 15,000, right? Or whatever. But you could, in the first instance, when you're starting, just tailor it in a way that suits what your event actually needs. And without kind of just trying to make loads of money. Events is not a money business. I'll tell you that now. It's not. You can make money by leveraging the event. And over time, it can become a money business. But in the first instance, it's not. I'll tell you that for free. So there's that. And I think also making sure you approach them early when you are ready. So in that year-long round, make sure you do approach them with your packages when you are ready. And then I'd say to have some bespoke packages. So even if you've got these packages in place, maybe have another one or be willing to be flexible based on whatever they might say their budget is, or they might say, you know what, I quite like this gold package, but I don't want that and I don't want that, but I do want that. And, you know, and be willing to move things around and make numbers up, right, in the first instance to get things going. But it might be hard to hear, but be ready to spend your own money. Because I will tell you something, there's been a good few tech and garners that have come out of my own pocket. They've come out of the pocket of my friends and family, right, to get to this point. So that level of commitment needs to be there if you want to build a brand. If you're looking at a one-off event and whatever, that's different. I'm not sure who's on the call, but if you're looking to build a brand in Africa, make sure you're willing to spend your own money at some point, because you might have to and need to. Even if you get the sponsorship, sometimes it takes a while to come through, right? So it's a bit of, you know, was it Paul pay Peter or whatever?
Yeah, well, Peter to pay Paul. Yeah.
A bit, right? So you got to be willing to do that hustle, like, as well along the way, and that's just how it goes, right? So on the partnership side, I think I spent too much time on the sponsorship, but on the partnership side, I mean, they come in all different shapes and sizes. I think in the first instance, I will talk about the partnership with a local partner who also does events. It didn't matter how much experience I had previously. I could have done the event by myself, but I'm telling you, I would have fallen flat on my face by now had I not had a local partner. I worked with Clone Inventive, run by Joseph. Shout out to Joseph. So he does all the negotiations when it comes to like my exhibitor stands, like getting printing done, you know, all the little knickknacks that we need for the event. I've also got like Eben from Desire UK. He's based in the UK and Ghana. He deals with all the AV, all the audio visual stuff. Again, I could have gone out and got all of these things myself, but these guys are on the ground, have already got these relationships, and then they do it on behalf of my company. Right. So, and in that way, even now, even though I've been around for like 8 years and a lot of the vendors now know me directly, I still wouldn't go over my partners' heads to try and have the conversation with them. It just isn't the way you do things. Right. So have a local partner who you can work with on the ground, who can help you with the logistics, because trust me, when things go wrong, and they will, these are the guys that get things fixed like within the blink of an eye. You cannot do it by yourself. It's too difficult, and the terrain is too temperamental. So that's what I would say about partnerships in terms of like logistics. But for content, you know, you might want to work with partners. Like we've worked with people like the Tony Blair Institute that have come in and supported us on like policy content, that's on like content last year, and we've had them, you know, bring into the event over time. We've got people like the International Trade Center. So what they do is they will bring like a delegation over from so the International Trade Center, they basically support companies who are trying to I guess scale their businesses in London. Somebody like that might sort of sponsor you to then bring their delegation like into your conference and things like that. So there's different types. We've even got people like Afro, which is an African like drinks brand. They do our networking parties, after parties. We still see them in all different shapes and sizes. I'm missing anyone, but they're the ones that kind of come off the top of my head.
Brilliant. I'm conscious of time. I've got loads more questions, but I know that obviously we've got a limited amount of time. But I suppose kind of you've given us sort of a lot of information, actually, some really valuable information about the way to approach things, you know, the things that have worked for you guys with Tech in Ghana. What have been, I suppose the last couple of questions is, you know, I suppose 8 years in, we're now sort of 2024, you've got the next edition coming up in June in London. Like, you know, how have you been able to keep it fresh, right? Why are people still interested? The Accra edition, we had a record number of ticket sales, you know, so more and more people are, the brand is growing effectively. So yeah, how have you been able to keep it fresh in these 8 years?
Yeah, look, you got to understand, right? The the landscape is evolving, constantly evolving, right? And I'm not a techie. I say this all the time. I'm not on the ground. I'm not a founder. I'm not a startup. I'm not, you know, participating per se in that way. I'm bringing everyone together. So how I keep it fresh is by consulting the industry, right? So all year round, similar to what I was saying about the sponsorship, I'm engaging with, like, a lot of them become good friends of mine, founders, you know, the startups, you know, the enablers, the government, everybody that's involved in our bubble, in our world. I make it my business to spend time understanding who they are, what they're dealing with, and what they need. You know, in the early days, when we first brought over the companies to Tech in Ghana in London, those companies were well established, right? So they were like, I don't know if you know these people, but people like Express Pay, M-Pedigree, IPMC, Vodafone. These are big boys. They came out of the Bank of Ghana. They all came themselves. As time went on and companies, you know, like your eCampuses, Farmerline, Kudigo, as all these guys started coming and growing, they were able to stand on their own 2 feet and fly over and participate. But it's for me to understand what was it that was making them come, and what is the value in them coming over, and making it my business to tailor the event to suit, you know, the industry. I'm not trying to impress nobody outside. I'm trying to actually support and build the ecosystem, and I've become obsessed with that, and they know it. So, you know, one of the things that we did was move the event from February into June. And I spent my time going back to partnerships, building my partnership with London Tech Week so that I could bring more value to the startups that were flying over to London. You know, flying over to London to come to one event in February versus flying over to London to come to that event in June in the middle of London Tech Week, who are our partners, who we can say, look, come to Tech in Ghana on the Tuesday, but for the rest of the week, you can participate in London Tech Week. And we've got the in for you on that, and what keeps us relevant to the industry, right? And then vice versa, you know, on the ground in Ghana, we do a similar thing, you know, as the startups are needing more, right? So, you know, we incorporate things like capacity building workshops. We evolved when virtual reality and AI started coming into play. We made sure that those things were also incorporated. We engaged the gaming community, right? We don't just keep it like high level, fancy pantsy, you know, ambassadors coming to open and then we're happy. We just think I have a genuine relationship with the industry itself. And I think that is what keeps it strong and concentrated. And then that's what makes people want to come.
100%. And it's been amazing to kind of watch you do that, watch you and the team do that throughout the years. So Dymax has been a partner to Tech in Ghana since 2020. Yep. So we're entering our 4th year. And if we had more time, I'd go into how Akosua and I sort of first met, but we don't have the time, unfortunately. But yeah, so we've been partnering and supporting Tech in Ghana with the marketing since 2020. 2020, as we know, was COVID. So you did a completely online version of Tech in Ghana. 2021, we were still coming out of COVID. So we did a bit of a hybrid, one day online in Accra, one day online, and then one day in person in Accra. And then ever since then, it's kind of been back in person for both London and Accra. So we've kind of had that experience of working with you in sort of the many different iterations of the brand since 2020, which I think has helped us in terms of thinking about marketing strategy, what has worked, and sort of incorporating that kind of hybrid online element into the brand. So
yeah, and I think that to me was a massive game changer. Like working with Dymax and working with you, Joe, is like, I think brought a whole new breath of fresh air into what it is that we were doing, because you know, COVID changed things dramatically in terms of how obviously people were like looking at events and attending events. But to be able to have maintained that, you know, that exclusively online conference and then go into that hybrid versus sort of in person set up, I think we couldn't have done that without working with you, right? Because you guys were experts or are experts in that field, and it really made me also understand the importance of brand visibility, right? So everybody's online. You can't just wait until June and November to see and understand what taking Ghana is. I think, and doing more around the storytelling, doing more around brand. Yep, you're back. You're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the listeners could hear or not, but I was just saying, like, you bringing you guys on board, and doing more around the storytelling bit online and showcasing what we, who the speakers are and the way we showcase that, and the digital marketing, I think, and also the Twitter chats that we started doing, the LinkedIn lives and all of that activity, I think has helped to bring more eyeballs towards the brand, and has helped to be more, I think, more inclusive for people that can't, show up in person. And I think we're just going to go more and more down that road. And I think anyone who's looking to build a brand in Africa should definitely think about incorporating an online element, whether that's the digital marketing or whether that's a hybrid version of your event, into it, because the interest around Africa at the moment is huge, and it can help to elevate what you're doing and get you to reach the right partners that are not necessarily based in the territory that you're in.
100%. And actually, I mean, we don't have enough time, but I was sort of going to go through some of the tactics that we've adopted that have worked particularly well for Tech in Ghana. But we are putting together an event marketing checklist that we'll send out to all participants, people that have signed up. So that information is still be available for people. But I'm just conscious of time because we've overrun.
It's flown by.
I know it has, isn't it? We just want to see if there's any a couple of questions that might have come through. I'm going to take a look to see if anything has come through in the chat. If there are any questions for anything that Akosua has mentioned today, or any particular questions around what sort of Dimax has done in terms of marketing for Tech in Ghana, any particular questions for Akosua, then let us know, type them in the Q&A, or we can get you up if you want to sort of ask your question directly. Tiffany said, thank you so much. This was great. Thank you, Tiffany. We had one question that did come in prior to, as part of registration. So I'm going to read that out, and then, if there's any others that come in, then we can sort of get to those. So I think you've kind of answered this, but this person asked, though, how best can we work with the conflicting reality of the ways of working in Ghana and the attitudes that surround the complexity of this versus the international way and standards? So I think this...
I get very protective of the homeland. Yeah, I think I've addressed this already. I mean, I think, you just really need to, because if it's Eric question as well, it's like, it is professional. Like, take everything on a case-by-case basis. I think when we sort of look at it like, oh, but it's so hard, or it's so slow, or the system is this or that, or yes, as you navigate and you go through, you will experience, based on specific things that you need to get done, you will experience some frustrating moments, absolutely, right? But it's all about what can you do to mitigate that ahead of time. So know the terrain you're going into, have some local partners that you're working with who are absolutely professional, who are, stellar in terms of the way you get the right partners, in terms of the way that they can help you navigate through some of the challenges that you might come across, and also embrace some of the so-called non-international standards, right? Because those non-international standards will help you. I'll give you another story. When I had a check that needed clearing one day, and when I tell you I was on my face, I needed some money, and I had a check that needed clearing, and it was taking me the frustrating bit was I went to go and pick it up from another institution. Took the whole day. Right, so I called my bank manager around 1-2 o'clock and said, I'm picking up a check. I'll be there soon. Can I get it cash today? They said, no problem. This is in Ghana, right? In Accra. Yes, no problem. You come, right? That's me or my bank manager, first and foremost, on the phone. Then I get the check, but I imagine I'm in an institution. I don't get that check. All someone has to do is sign it and give it to me. I didn't get it till like 4:45, something like that. I was in there for half my day. Frustrating as hell, unnecessary. I get the check. I thought, damn, I'm gonna miss the bank because it closes at 5. Around 5:20 something, I'm on my way home. The bank manager calls me. He says, I thought you were coming. And I said, I can't come. I said, I didn't get the check till late, so I'll come tomorrow. He said, no, I'm here waiting for you, madam. I am here waiting for you. Try and ask HSBC to do that.
Wouldn't happen.
Do you understand? So I'm not saying like I'm making a joke of it because when you're there for a long period of time, I've been there for a good 8 years. When you're there for a long period of time, it's peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs. It's not just one, you know what I mean? One monotone nightmare. It's not, right? That's not the reality, right? And I know people have had some real bad experiences, and I'm not taking away from that, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? I can only talk to my own experience.
Brilliant. I think we've got a couple of questions come through. So Rashid has asked, how do you make sure you have an equitable partnership?
That's a good question, because someone said that to me before. They were like, yeah, partnership. Some people use partnership really lightly. Some people say partnership, and all they mean is they just want to ride off the back of your work, right? And I think it's really about just finding the biting point of your synergy, right? Why are they coming to you, and why would you work with them? A lot of the time, it's you need to really think about, and I often think about like content. I think about what we stand for in terms of like the narrative, in terms of reach, and if I can't see like the ways in which this partnership can fit into the bigger picture of what we're trying to do, then I'd sort of give it a miss, because usually when somebody wants a partnership with us, is to either get some kind of access or exposure of some kind, right? Or but even the access and exposure is like of what? Like what is the content you're trying to expose? Is that going to also make sense for our audience, right? And so I think it's just it's really a case-by-case basis. You just need to really be strong in what you stand for and understand what you stand for, and what the event means to you. And I mean, it's okay. I'm trying to think of like another sort of partnership, like even with Afro, with the drinks, right? It's an African brand, right? And what they stand for and the bigger picture behind it for us is a nice reason to work with a brand like that, right? So we have our own there's a certain energy and a certain relationship that we look for, and vice versa. If they want something from us, if we're not able to give back what the person is hoping to get or what the partner is hoping to get, I'll just say we're not able to do that, right? There's some partners that come and ask for our database and just want to send our database a load of stuff that's nothing to do with tech in Ghana. We're not going to do it, right? So I'll just be like, no, we're not going to do that. So I think you just have to take it on a case-by-case basis. I hope that sort of answers the question, or at least addresses it.
Brilliant. I'm going to probably take one last question. There's been a couple that have come in, but we're almost at the hour. So someone has asked, is the tech ecosystem rapidly developing in Ghana? Question. Like in other African countries. A lot of the ministries seem to still use traditional media rather than digital. So wondering how much tech is actually on the agenda.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yes, it is. I mean, as with anywhere else in the world, it is rapidly developing in many ways, some faster than others. And using the ministry as an example is really interesting, because although there is a sort of a push for the nation to be digitized generally, right, to digitize like public services, and they've got the Ghana card and all these things happening, when you do go into the institutions themselves, they are still very old school in their methods and the way that they do things, right? And using traditional media is one of them. And I think that might, there's a number of reasons. Be minute take you, almost a month. So I think things work slower generally there. And I think it's also about the people inside the ministry. So unless the person that's working for the PRO within that particular ministry is building relationships with new digital media blogs or the new influencers online, or has an understanding a while before you're going to see that be reflected within the ministry. Because at the moment, ministries and the relationship with the media goes back decades, right? And their relationships with the journalists in the media goes back decades. And who they want to see, the information that they are releasing, those people are still reading the papers, right? They're not necessarily on whatever digital media blog we may be on. But I think there is a transition happening. I think it's a really interesting dynamic, because on the one hand you might, like I said, see some real innovation happening, and on the other you can feel like you've gone back in time. So really interesting space.
And to add to that, actually, I think from a marketing perspective, we always say that like a 360 approach is always a good way in which you can connect with your audiences, right? And that does include traditional media. And that's not just, thinking about from an African context where, the internet penetration is not so high. That's even just a global thing where it's just like, you need to interact with your customers 7 to 11 touch points in order for a customer to engage with your brand, right? So think about 7 to 11 touch points. Some of those, can be offline as well as online in order to kind of get your sort of customer attention. So we're on the hour. I just wanted to say thank you, Akosua, for joining us. We could have sat here for another hour, I'm sure. To finish up, I just wanted to quickly give you the opportunity.
To give a few words. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you, to finish up, just to kind of give us a bit of a quick summary, 30 seconds.
I can hear you now. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? 30-second summary of what's next for Tech in Ghana.
Yes. Event is coming up in June, so it's on the 11th of June, which is part of .com. And then we have another one coming up towards the end of the year in November. So we're still doing that twice a year, London and Accra. So next one's the 11th of June. The Accra one will be at the end of November. In between that, we've got some brilliant partnerships that we've formed, one being with Tech South Africa, which is going to be in Morocco, and then later in the year in Dubai. So we're doing the rest of the busy year as always. And Dymax will be with us along the way. So you can also be checking us out on all the socials, because along the way we will be creating a lot of content, and there'll be a lot of information and announcements happening on our Tech in Ghana platforms, which is Tech in Ghana across the majority of them.
Brilliant. And there we have it. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know we went over the 45 minutes, but we really appreciate it. And thank you, Akosua, for your time. Really valuable session. And yeah, thanks guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all. Take care, everybody.
Bye.